Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Layer by Layer, the show about 3D printing and our place inside the industry. Today we're going to talk about ARC investment, talking about 3D printing, the Bambu Labs lawsuit, don't worry, we'll get to that, and desktop metal going down the drain. But before that, let's go ahead and pay the bills. This episode is brought to you by Tangled Filament. Tangled Filament is our attempt to reduce the cost of 3D printer filament by making efficient production and making it fast and easily without any sort of shenanigans. We started out at 22, we've currently dropped the cost down to 15, and we're going on our way down to 10. You can purchase any color you want, so long as it's black. So check out Tangled Filament over at tangledfilament.com. All right. The news. ARC Investment posted ARC Investments by Kathy Wood. Posted a video on YouTube a week ago that some folks sent to us. Thank you so much. Discussing 3D printing and why they're so bullish on it. ARK Invest owns stock in Markforged, I think almost exclusively. I don't think they have anything in Desktop Metal or anywhere else, but Markforged. And the reason they like Markforged is because of kind of the ecosystem that Markforged currently has. But they were talking about 3D printing and why they thought it was useful. And I have a response because I think their analysis is incomplete. They're missing some very fundamental parts of this while still getting big chunks of it correct, but they're very broad brush. They brought up how 3D printing sand castings could radically improve automotive manufacturing in other areas because making sand castings with 3D printing would be more efficient than constructing them traditionally. That's certainly true. They spoke about this in the context of Tesla and making full mega castings for the rears. The thing with this is that it's been very experimental, and those large castings are very inefficient to produce with 3D printing. However, for anybody who is interested in the scuttlebutt, those large sand castings are produced by Desktop Metal. So that's interesting. But Tesla, the gigacasting, megacasting plan for Tesla has been in a little bit of flux because they've been messing around with it. And we're going to see where that actually lands with the new generation of machines of Tesla. But that's a separate side conversation. But anyhow, they very focused on sand molds. But then they also said that the printers have predominantly created value for the users, not for the suppliers. And this is stupidly true. Oh, amazingly true. The 3D printing industry has captured very little of the value chain of 3D printing because the making of the machines, has not been profitable because every single public company is actively losing large amounts of money and has for forever. But the users of the machines are getting a lot of value from it. But that value is not going upstream to the manufacturers in any sort of fashion. So there is a lot of value to be had from 3D printed parts, but not from making the machines. And this is not surprising because this is the exact same scenario that played out with injection molding. Injection molding, the machine manufacturers did okay for a minute, but then once everybody had the machines, the parts that the machines make are what are valuable. This is the philosophy that we have here. Is we think the machines should be invisible. That's why we believe in print farms and not home printers or print farms inside of a facility or anything like that. We believe that suppliers, users, customers want to get the part, and they don't care how the part got there, which means that you can then architect the 3D printing workflow around like fulfillment centers. ARC said that probably one of the biggest ways that manufacturers could absorb some of the value down the supply chain is by having a better feedback loop in the construction of the parts. So like the machine actively monitors how the part is made and then is able to adjust the part on the next round. Sensor-led analysis, kind of helps with that and is certainly true. But again, that's kind of in the machine itself and not something that the manufacturer can necessarily hold on unless they turned it into like a subscription cloud model where it's like you can send your analysis back up to us and then we will optimize your print settings over time, and that's how they could capture more value there, improving the process for the client based on some parameters. But that is freaking difficult to do, and you have all the problems of talking to customers. They said there were restrictions around education and time to adoption. Yes, they didn't say it, but 3D printers have the problem of waiting for a whole bunch of old folks to die. There are the education and the retraining of the workforce to where new engineers, product designers, project managers get to decide to use 3D printing rather than just simply using what they know, which is molding, is a big inhibitor to 3D printing. Like just getting a new generation of folks who are open to using the technology is a big part of it. But with all that being said, they thought 3D printing could scale at 40% annually to 180 billion by 2030. I agree. I think that's good. Right now, we looked at a report a few weeks ago, and they were estimating the 3D printing industry to get to like 40 to 60 billion, I believe, by the end of the decade. I think that's way too small. 180 billion sounds about right with the amount of value that 3D printing is able to create and hasn't been sourced. I mean, printing has had a huge amount of potential for more than 10 years right now, and people just have not created the business models around it, creating the products. Everybody's been so focused on, we're going to put a machine in every home. And that's a dumb idea and a bad business model and has failed multiple times. Every time. It's all been done. It's had its shot. There's no new technological revolution that was necessary in order to make home 3D printing viable. It just doesn't work. Okay. But the thing that ARK Invest missed, and I don't think they recognized, is that within the re-architecting of the business models, they consider 3D printing to be a manufacturing technology. I disagree. Printing is a fulfillment technology. I'll tell you why. Like right now, us as a print farm, many of our clients are international because they get to design a part over there, test it, verify it, get it all working, and then they get to email it to us, and the part is made over here and fulfilled over here. And over the next couple of years, we're going to be building out more fulfillment centers, more print farms that function as fulfillment centers. And that allows us to make the part very close to where the consumer has it. And since we do that, since we're able to teleport a part around, we are allowed to absorb the margins of manufacturing, warehousing, and fulfillment service providers. All three of those condense into one of our print farms, which means that we have very long-term profitability because we have multiple industries that we are able to effectively absorb the margins of without changing the cost to the end user. They still get the same part for the same price as before, but we have made everything so much more efficient that we are able to have charge the same price delivered as the old system, but we only get to do it in one step, so we get to make more money. And that is something that ARK doesn't realize, and that 3D printing enables that new business model to where there is other profitability to be had out there, especially when you're producing and fulfilling parts. So a good analysis, I would say it's incomplete and very specific to Tesla and SpaceX, because of course ARK likes Tesla and SpaceX, but there's a broader part of the story that's useful, but I think their ultimate conclusion is correct, even though their premises were a little bit incomplete. So ARK, if you would like some additional data and input on this research around 3D printing, feel free to reach out. We can do a collaboration video. I can come on there and talk to you all about this stuff. Learn you a thing or two. All right. Unusual Machines Inc. has adopted HP's multi-jet fusion for 3D printing production of drone components. This has been done through Forecast 3D. Forecast 3D is another service provider that focuses really heavy. They were one of the first users of MJF when it came out. But Unusual Machines is using them to produce like the housings and the drone propeller ducts. What's the outer housing? Somebody will comment. Thank you. The outer housing of a drone around the propellers. They're producing those. They're currently for sale. And they like 3D printing, and the MJF was able to keep the cost down while they were still putting manufacturing inside the States. So good for them. I don't know Unusual Machines very well. I do know Forecast quite well. Very early on, Forecast was actually sort of one of the incentives for starting Slant 3D because they didn't have FDM at the time. When Slant 3D was started, we were shopping for a service provider to print parts for us. And we ended up having to build Slant 3D in order to produce the parts for that project. Forecast was one of the suppliers that we spoke to that just wasn't able to provide what we were looking for. So we've known them for forever. And of course, they were one of the first ones to use MJF. They had MJF before it was publicly available for purchase. They were one of the beta testers. So, but yeah, great. This is all good stuff. The implementation of HP's advanced 3D printing is not only helping us control costs, but allows us to create high-quality products capable of meeting the performance demands of FPV drones. Guys, this is a quote from the CEO of Unusual Machines. The implementation of HP's advanced 3D printing technology is not only helping us control costs, but so on. As Slant 3D grows and we become a public company, somebody call me on it if I drum up a statement. HP's advanced 3D printing technology. I could not ever say that phrase. I don't say Slant 3D's advanced 3D printing technology. We have a pretty advanced 3D printing technology and really good systems. But I say we've got really good systems that do a pretty darn good job. That's my phrase. If I ever turn to corporate speak, please somebody say something. Okay, Desktop Metal, Massachusetts-based released its financial result. Desktop Metal released its financial results for the second quarter of 2024. Planned these results as these came as they announced their $183 million takeover by Nano Dimension. Desktop Metal is currently trading at $140 million publicly, but they're going to be paid $183 million. Rick Fulop offered new insights to the motivations for this. Failing to complete the deal with Nano Dimension would lead to a fatal prognosis for Desktop Metal, Fulop added. So, with that statement, he must be very confident that there's no way the Nano Dimension deal will fall through. In Q2, Desktop Metal recorded revenue of $38.9 million, a 27% decrease from last year. Revenue fell 4.1%. Despite working tirelessly to align its cost structure with the macroeconomy realities, DM's operating loss grew to minus $101 million. This represented a 108% year-over-year increase from a loss of minus $58.5 million last year. According to Fulop, this poor performance was driven by an increasingly challenging business environment characterized by increasing interest rates and slowing capital expenditure budgets. Worth approximately $183 million or $5.50 per share, the deal represents a 27.3% premium of Desktop Metal closing price. According to Fulop, the last 1.5 years have seen significant pressure exerted on DM's financial position as their results have been trending downwards. I had some final stats. DM announced a $50 million cost reduction thing. Yeah, other stats and so on and so forth. So I read all of that because, Desktop Metal was in dire straits. Some color to this. His statement of macroeconomic realities with interest rates and slowing capital expenditure budgets. Slowing capital expenditure budgets means companies are not giving as much money to try experimentation because those are the first things cut when companies are reducing. Manufacturing hasn't necessarily grown in the last couple of years. It's been doing okay, but certainly not in the 3D printing space. Interest rates increasing have reduced wild investment money, which Desktop Metal was quite dependent on for a long time. So there's not necessarily the same sort of slush funds that were available to allow a company to move fast and grow quickly and spend money. So that is kind of the culminating parts of that. Desktop Metal is very nearly out of cash. Now, there's some other color to this. I was curious, reading this story, I was curious, gee whiz, everybody publicly traded is having a hard time. Does Markforged release results? They're having a hard time. Desktop Metal's been having a hard time for a while. All the things. I looked at every public company's financial statement. I found some weird stuff that I actually haven't quite qualified inside my mind, but ultimately, every single publicly traded 3D printing company is losing $20 to $100 million a year. Everyone. 3D Systems, Stratasys, all of them, new guys, whatever it was. Pure 3D printing companies losing money hand over fist. All of them have a little bit of cash reserve that's keeping them alive. Nano Dimension is also a part of this. And Nano Dimension is generally the one considered Mr. Moneybags in the world. They're not Mr. Moneybags. They had $1 billion that they got from, I can't remember if it was an investment or if they'd actually just stored it up over time. But Nano Dimension currently only has about $750 million of money lying around. They're going to acquire Desktop Metal, which is losing $100 million per year. The cost reduction of Desktop Metal, they spent a ton of money acquiring the companies for a while. I thought they would have more cost savings with the absorption of those companies when they got rid of 5 accounting departments and just had one corporate overlord one. But I don't see that happening. So I don't see how Nano Dimension will absorb Desktop Metal and start making money off of it. Like this is a rough situation. And they got to be playing a long game, and it's going to be expensive. But to be fair, Nano Dimension has $700 million, and they burn $100 million a year. They got 7 years to get it figured out, and 7 years is a long time. 7 years is a really long time. So it might not be a big deal, but like the public markets for 3D printing companies are stupid bleak. Like I've been in the industry. I've looked at a lot of the guys. I'd never run through everybody all in the same day and looked at them side by side. I thought a few of them were profitable or doing okay or not having big losses. No, we're all doing terrible. And I don't know how. I know a lot of the private 3D printing companies are in the similar sort of boat because they don't have too much new or interesting. But anyhow, no, it's just a rough life out there. Which is why we are now going to lead into the story of the Bambu Labs Stratasys lawsuit. So, Bambu, okay, here we go. Stratasys has sued Bambu Labs over 10 separate patents. These patents include additive manufacturing method for printing three-dimensional parts with purge towers, heated build platform and system for three-dimensional printing methods, method for building three-dimensional objects with extrusion-based layered deposition systems, three-dimensional printer with force detection, three-dimensional printer with force detection number 2. All of these sound very familiar because these have been around for a while in consumer machines. The other patents, the 10 patents named in the lawsuit, also include tagged build material for 3D printing, networked 3D printing, which came from MakerBot, networked 3D printer with 3D scanner, which would probably a hit at the laser scanner, 3D printer with force detection, came from MakerBot, method for printing 3D parts with purge tower and heated build platform, so on and so forth. About half the patents came from MakerBot and half the patents came from Stratasys. And by the way, this makes the MakerBot acquisition look a whole lot better because they got a patent portfolio that's useful. So in the context of companies hurting, Stratasys is hurting. And the theory that people have posted on Reddit as to why Stratasys is doing this now, when all of these features have been out in consumer printers for 8 to 10 years. Prusa has a heated build platform. Ultimaker has a heated build platform. Everybody's built these things. I think a big part of it is an indication of just how small the consumer 3D printing market has been and how much it doesn't affect 3D systems. 3D systems sold really expensive commercial machines. They never tried to do consumer. When they got MakerBot, it was a prosumer model. They never interacted with Enders and Prusas and that kind of stuff. So they didn't care about the loss of revenue to a couple of companies that each make $50 million. It wasn't, if a company earns $50 million in revenue, if they're doing well, they're profiting like $5 million in revenue. Stratasys is doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So a $5 million tick by introducing an Ender machine that's low margin doesn't matter to them. It's not worth it. It's not worth paying the lawyers to go chase down Creality for this. Then came along Bambu Lab. Bambu Lab has a machine that produces very good quality parts and is very affordable. So someone who would have otherwise purchased a $20,000 machine is now buying a $1,000 machine. This is something, given the current market climate, that Stratasys cares about. So they're like, now we're going to enforce our patents because this matters a bunch. They may have also had deals in place with folks like Ultimaker, Prusa, maybe even Creality, I don't know, to where those companies may have been silently licensing the rights to those patents. And Stratasys said, yeah, you can use them, pay us $1 off of every machine, and then we don't have to sue you, and you can keep on making your little machines, we don't care. Bambu Lab may not have done that. Bambu Lab's response has been one of, we've always respected all the things and we don't think it's right, and so on and so forth, yada, 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 yada. They obviously they're not going to respond to it. They have not received any notes from the court. They haven't. There's an argument that hasn't been had yet. Stratasys just filed the lawsuit, shot across the bow, and now the court will decide how they want to hear it. The court case is happening in Texas, which is very patent friendly, so it doesn't look good for Bambu Lab. But Bambu Lab is also a Chinese company. IP law is a little different over there. But anyhow, the context of this is that consumer 3D printing became good enough that it is now causing a problem for professional companies, to where Stratasys, with decreasing corporate expenditure budgets that Desktop Metal is feeling, those guys will now consider a cheap consumer machine rather than the expensive 3D printing machine, brand identity or no. So they're taking a part of the pie. And Bambu Labs shipped, they say it's looking like we're shipping about 1 million printers during the Christmas season each year. This year it's probably going to be more. It's probably going to be 1.5, maybe even 2. 1 million printers last quarter, or last Christmas. 1 million printers, each one is $1,000. Cool. We just sold $1 billion worth of 3D printing merchandise last Christmas. That's a big chunk of stuff. So there's so many things that we have to deal with all these things. There's just so much money moving around now that it's interesting, and people have to engage with all of this, and these companies have to engage with it, because the pie is shrinking for the industry. This guy over here, Bambu Lab, has popped up and is doing really well and is starting to eat into the shrinking pie of somebody else. So it makes sense that this lawsuit would come across now rather than years ago. But yeah, it's a thing. As far as how it interacts with it, everybody's like, oh, if Bambu Labs loses, all the consumer printers are going to get shut down and Prusa won't be able to make build platforms. The note I would have on that is that the heat bed patent, which is kind of the most important of all of these, well, it expires in 2035, which is a long time from now. I don't know how the heat bed patent exists for that long, because the heated build platform has been around for a long time. I'm surprised that many of these patents have the lifespan that they do. Like tagged material for 3D printing, that expires in 2028. The actual FDM printing technology, the patent for that expires in 27. All of these patents are still alive in a way that I didn't think they were. So I didn't realize so many of these features were still patented, because I thought they would have gone out back in like the 2012 wave. But whatever. So they could still impact the consumer 3D printer market, especially if they keep on getting all uppity. But ultimately what would happen is Bambu Labs selling a lot of machines. What will happen is if they lose, Stratasys will cut a deal with them, where Bambu Lab gets to license the technology. Stratasys gets 10 to 20 bucks off of every machine that Bambu sells, and they'll go from there, because Stratasys isn't going to start making a consumer machine right now. They can't. They wouldn't be able to build one that would compete with Bambu. They don't have the expertise. So that's all that stuff. Woo, that's the news. A lot of news this week. We never get a lot of news in the week. All right, normal company stuff. Tangled, the schedule on Tangled, Filament, here we go. The update on all this. So, Tangled, so you guys are aware, very likely Tangled is going to be shut down and stop accepting new orders on November 1st. The reason for this is because we are a print farm company first. And on November 1st, all of Christmas hell breaks loose. And we want to make sure that we're shipping parts correctly for our customers who are using things like our API and the Etsy integration and everything else. That is the focus. So we will be only producing material for internal use. We will not be, we very likely will not be making and shipping Tangled orders during that time, because it's just kind of a distraction at that point. That being said, we recognize that we are a low-cost filament provider, and during the Christmas season, filament all disappears. So, knowing that, we'd like to have some stuff available on like December 5th when all of you guys are trying to run your Etsy stores and are running out of stuff. You'll have to connect the Etsy app and run through our print farm. No, we're trying to see if we can have some filament available for like Tangled members and that kind of stuff, so that you guys have a supply chain that's consistent and reliable. But at the same time, guys, we can't prioritize it very much. The other thing we will do is that we will probably have a large batch drop that will be discounted to like $14, maybe lower, but probably about $14. Big old batch made here before October that folks will be able to get in and store up whatever you want for the Christmas season. And that will be our price break, and we'll be able to test that business model of it. So we're going to do a couple things, but like, yeah, November 1st, very likely there will not be Tangled filament available. So that is how the production schedule will go. The next year around, if demand and everybody's really whining about it, then we'll prep better the next time around. But like, we're a print farm company, guys. We have to make sure that our printers are running and we're taking care of our people and resources and stuff. Okay, API updates. For anybody who doesn't know, there was a major slicer update to the API here over the last couple of weeks. So mess with print quality and thin features. Thin features, if you had a feature that came in that was like 0.35 millimeters wide, which shouldn't exist, that's bad modeling, don't do that. But a nozzle width wide, some of them would get rejected by or omitted by the slicer, and then printed out and sent off. We fixed that, so down to fairly thin features we'll go through. But please do not design 3D printed features that are less than 2 nozzle diameters across, which means 0.8 millimeters. Don't go thinner than that. That A is not a structurally sound part, and it doesn't create a feature that is useful to you and creates a software bug for you. You shouldn't ever design a FDM printed feature that's thinner than a millimeter, because you want 2 nozzle widths to make sure that you reliably produce that part and it's not going to snap off, because a single layer adhesion is not significant. So there's that. But we've updated it to address it because there are parts going by that were using it, and we wanted to get that fixed. So slicer update on that. Also improved seam lines on the machines going through the automated slicer. So big updates to the API on that. If you tested it a month ago and it wasn't doing what you needed for your part, try it again. And heck, reach out to us and we'll just ship you a new part, and that'll be fine. And we'll do that, especially if you were a previous API user. Just let us know, like, hey, I didn't like the part before. Check it out now. Can I get a new piece? And we'll be like, yeah, we'll reprint your part and resend it to you as a software update notification. Okay, API, structure of the API. Within this conversation, the API is a very difficult piece of technology because the slicer settings for that part have to be different from the slicing settings for that part. A figurine needs different settings than a cookie cutter, than a nightlight. That challenge means that we either introduce those categories into the API or we fork the API and create a version for each one of those categories. Very likely it'll just be features added to the API, because that way we can put those features into existing apps and still use the same API, but it increases the complexity of the API. And I don't like that, because I really like a really simple API where this file goes through and it works just fine. Having the input to it very controlled by having it focused on a very particular category is enticing. Because then any individual developer who's like, I'm making a cookie cutter thing or a lamp maker, I know I can just push lamps through the lamp API and I'll get a lamp out. That's cleaner and it's easier to set up a system that way. And what we're doing with the software is trying to make it easier and easier for people to use it. And that adding an API with dozens of calls, which is like, here's an enclosure, here's a lithophane, whatever it happens to be, that makes it convoluted. There's a lot of documentation to go through, all the rest of it. Oh, also side note, we need to feed all the documentation for the API into a GPT and get that to where you can just ask questions and it'll tell you exactly what you need. We need to get that done. Gravy, we'll get to that eventually. Okay, other updates. A Shopify app. The Shopify app is going through Shopify certification right now. It's done. We built it. But there's all these little things that are not documented, that we don't know about, that they're able to test for. And actually, by the way, I am wildly impressed by the Shopify app review team because they are testing features in a non-automated way that are very eclectic. And I want to know what their documentation or SOP is for how do they do that. And I want to bring that into the company because that's just great. They're like really eclectic user interface actions that they have a checkbox for somehow on their side. And they're like, you missed this. Like if you go forward into this link icon and then go back, it doesn't refresh this page over here on this product listing. And I'm like, what? Like, I dislike when an app has an obvious error that missed a thing. Like, oh, you hit the back button and you hit back and the page didn't refresh. Well, that's dumb and obvious. But there's really eclectic and subtle UI requirements that they have that they're catching and identifying. And it is impressive. And I'm not deep enough within software development to understand how they're doing that. And I've worked with a bunch of software before, but like this is impressive. And I know Shopify is a very impressive software creation organization, but wow, yeah. Etsy plugin updates. Yes, the Etsy plugin, which allows anybody to plug an Etsy store into our farm. So, the last week or couple weeks or so, the Etsy plugin has had a fairly large spike in users. We had several hundred users, and now we have more. And everything is scaling with it. We're taking care of them. All the parts are shipping on time. Everything's good. Don't freak out anybody. But it's ramping very quickly, and we're really excited about how it's ramping. Most of the thing that's interesting about it is that most of them are new users, as in people that didn't have a pre-existing Etsy store. And that's really exciting to us because that means that we're succeeding in our mission of making it more accessible. It's doing what the software is supposed to do, which is make print farms invisible and a resource that can be relied upon rather than something you have to build yourself and set up a whole organization to get operational. People shouldn't have to build their print farms. They should just be able to design a really cool thing and post it. And that is occurring. People are designing really cool things and just posting them on Etsy, and then they're using us for fulfillment and production. And that's so sick because all of these stores, all of these small businesses wouldn't otherwise exist if the plugin wasn't there. And that's really exciting, and it's really neat to see that it is the product market fit seems to kind of be hitting there to where people appreciate it, it's useful to them, and it's solving problems for them. So that's really satisfying as a product creator to see people liking and using this stuff, and also knowing that there's so much more to be done that can be done. Like even right now, like the Etsy plugin, Shopify API, all the rest of it are restricted on materials and colors and that kind of stuff. There aren't very many options. But that is a very simple thing to fix so long as all the rest of the processes are staying strong. We can introduce whatever color. Right now, we still have the lunar regolith available inside of the API, which is sick. Still sick. But yeah, we can introduce all kinds of new colors anytime we want to, and they may be releasing sooner rather than later. We'll see what happens. Yeah. Okay. That's that. Alrighty. Discussion topic. Holy cow, guys. I did not realize this was going to be as long of a show as it is. Normally it shows 30 minutes and then we're done. We're through into the back half of it now. The discussion topic is 3D model designers are way more important than they think. We did a video earlier this week about how to stop the theft of STLs. And this is something that it's a very clear issue because there are these professional designers and design teams on areas like Patreon that post a file and effectively have that file stolen because they cannot enforce the license except through crowd rule, and they cannot limit access to the files because as soon as somebody downloads the file, they can go repost it on Thingiverse and they're done. And they can't enforce the type of license because somebody could get a personal license which still gets full access to the catalog, but you can't sell it, but can go sell it on Etsy. And that's not good. That's not a good model if it's that broken to where those designers lose so much of their livelihood to where they have to be on this treadmill of create a new model. Otherwise, we're going to lose the people, and people are gypping us anyway. Like there's an insincerity in that as an industry, if that's not okay. When we made that video, I was surprised how many people disagreed with that idea that modelers should be paid for their work on an ongoing basis. Modelers are perfectly free to release free models, and in fact, it's even incentivized for them, because by having free models, you create like the freemium model, where the freemium business model, where people can download the free models and get access and understand the designer. But then if they want that really cool dragon, they got to pay $10 a month or something like that, and then get all the other cool dragons too. But we discussed some of the ways of dealing with this. The reason this is so important, and well, actually, before we get to why it's quite so important, a few people brought up a few comments that are just not relevant. People said, the modelers are all going to get replaced by AI in the next 2 years. Bad modelers will. Yeah, for sure. The 3D modeling software, or the 3D AI software right now, is actually surprisingly good. About on timeline with what we thought it was going to take. I remember we saw DALL-E and we thought, okay, 2 to 4 years before commercialization of this. We're at about 2 years. There's going to be some commercialization of this. But the AI generated models will need to continue to have designers, because it's like AI generated images. You can get a generic first pass that looks like an AI image after one guess, and that's fine for a lot of folks. But if you need something really specific, really targeted, really controlled, AI is not very good at that, because it's an average of the world. So if you want lighting in a particular, using images as a reference, if you want lighting a certain way, if you want certain sort of facial hair on a character in an image, or if you want this position of the hand or finger or arms or whatever it was, or this logo to look like this, there are the large models are not able to do that reliably, because they default down to a mean. And if you ask for a tree and I ask for a tree, it's going to make two slightly different trees, but they're going to be pretty similar. Even though I'm like, I'd like an evergreen tree, and you're like, I want a pine tree, but it's just going to kind of make the same tree. And if I come back around, it's still going to make kind of the same tree, even though it's a little bit different, but it's the same tree. That sameness, that averaging, comes up in the writing of AI too. Like AI writing is very easy to identify because it's so generic. And getting it broken out of that genericness is a skill that designers will be required for. Or to polish whatever the AI creates. Like, we need a hole right there that actually needs to be tilted up a little bit. Like the human contextual knowledge, especially in 3D modeling, where it's very complex. Right now, everybody who's doing humanoid robots, there are huge breakthroughs in humanoid robots, and LLMs have helped a bunch around contextual information and sizing and vision and all the rest of it. Big things. But handling a doorknob and interacting with the complexity of the world, walking through a forest and looking for a piece of bark or whatever it happens to be, that is still a wildly complex problem that does not have enough data to solve it. So there's still a human in the loop stuff needed for physical reality. So AI is not going to kill that. But 3D modelers, in our view, 3D printing is going to replace pretty much all of manufacturing of traditional items at some point. That means that the value then goes to the modeler, the person creating the idea, because the cost to manufacture the idea is zero. If somebody wants to buy the thing, they can buy the thing. If they don't want to buy the thing, you don't have to go make the thing. So it's not like you have an idea, you have to go get a mold and store up 10,000 parts. You just have to have an idea and post it. And then when somebody buys it and gives money, well, we get paid and you get paid, which means that you have most of the power as the modeler, because you're creating the thing that someone wants. Very similar to software. Very similar to software. The 3D model, especially when well-designed, a well-designed 3D model is as complex as an app. Does your chamfer on the bottom? Does it interface with this machine? Does it use that material well? Did you make the layer line show up and right? Did you apply a texture so that it looks nice? All of those actions, that bundling, that preparation, that nuance, are the same sort of things you have to do when you make an app for an iPhone. I can make a calculator app in like 2 seconds, but then prepping it to fit into the iPhone and work through that system is where the expertise comes in and where you have to play ball. And 3D modelers have to do the same thing when making a part for a particular system. And now you get to do the digital part of that part making. So the 3D models are the applications of future manufacturing and current manufacturing with our print farms right now. You can use the API right now. 3D model creation and good 3D model creation are going to be wildly important, because now that anybody can access our print farm and use it for free and make a part profitably, quickly, and reliably. So that's solved. Now everybody gets to focus on how to create models and create parts for people. And that's wildly bigger and more interesting, and enables all kinds of new stuff to be created that otherwise was never possible before. All these industrial design students who design cool lamps in their senior thesis, and then they go work for Walmart or something like that. I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry, Walmart. You guys don't make that many products, but work for a behemoth company that's boring. But those guys can now start creating solutions that are really useful. Or software developers can start creating apps that generate models that are really useful. All of that is a big problem to solve, and is not magically solved with, AI. AI is a big enabler and will assist with that a bunch, but it doesn't get it across the finish line. 3D models, large collections of 3D models and ongoing collections of 3D models, recreation of 3D models of out-of-date defunct spare parts, all of those need done, because that's the thing that's missing, the 3D models. There's 20 to 40 million of them out there on the internet right now, which is a bunch, but there need to be more. And there can now be so many more. The thing we talk about with like 3D print farms enable a store with infinite selection, but zero inventory. You can make models forever of every possible problem, solution, variation, whatever it happens to be. And when one person wants that model becomes profitable. You only have to sell one. If you can knock them out and have the AI help move the dimensions and that kind of thing. So watch the podcast from last week about AI generated tools and like file generation parts, designs and that kind of thing. But like there is significant and notable value to be created in model generation. And the 3D modelers who are artists and designers and product designers and know how to make a product that a person will enjoy and appreciate and interact with, that is an entire discipline like software development that is not respected as much as software development right now, but will be, because it will be the only way you can make this thing or whatever it happens to be in a way that's interesting. So 3D model designers are currently wildly undervalued, because they're having to create models for the 3D printing industry where everybody's like, I want it for free off Thingiverse. No. Those modelers are creating really valuable items that they should have ongoing returns from, effectively royalties. Our solution to it is those guys should be able to upload the models, and then anybody who wants to sell it can sell it, but then that designer gets a royalty off of the prints of the file. I think that's a better way of doing it. And I think it's enabled now that there are print farms and APIs and all the rest of it. But we don't have time to build it. Watch last week's video. We go into all that kind of stuff in depth. But like there's a way of doing this to where the 3D model designers are protected, and those artists, those creators, are able to make a living from these pieces of art. Because if somebody makes a fidget spinner today that sells 10 bajillion of them over the next 10 years, that designer should see benefit from their work. It shouldn't just disappear into the ether. The woman who invented fidget spinners invented them in the 90s, and then they went viral in 2016 on 3D printers, and she never saw a cent because the patent was gone. But if she had the design or whatever else it was, that each one of the designers who made those fidget spinners didn't see a penny from it. Just everybody downloaded 3 files and went about it, and then those designers are not then able to create more. And that's what's even more fantastic, is that if they can make a living doing it, then they can continue doing more of it. And getting a royalty from the print makes it easier for people to do that. It's like getting a penny from a view here on a YouTube video. Like, it helps enable us to make this content by the fact that YouTube pays us a penny every time somebody watches it. Not a penny, a fraction of a penny. But anyhow, so yeah, the 3D designers need better business models to support them than what they have right now, because they lose all their work every month as soon as they release it. And there should be a way to get around that. But Okay. Well, that's it, guys. Comment down below if there's anything else you want to talk about or if you see any news. And we've had a lot of folks be really good and send us out all kinds of stuff that we've been getting to talk about in the shows. So appreciate that. Have a great day, everybody.